What happens when the most successful pilot in the history of Hungaroring feels that he is no longer able to control his destination on the track? And what does this say about the car that promised to return to glory? Then in media statements it went further. I am useless, absolutely useless. The team has no problems, you have seen that the car is in pole. So they probably need to change pilot. No one in Ferrari wanted to respond to those words. No one could, because they were not simple comments of frustration. They were the symptom of a deep emotional fracture. Hamilton, the world heptacampion, the symbol of resilience and elegance in the paddock, was breaking. And he did it in the only place where he was once unbeatable. The most revealing thing is that his partner, Charles Leclerc, had achieved pole. With the same car, on the same day, on the same track. And this makes its sense of uselessness even more powerful. It was not a day to hide behind technical excuses. It was a day in which a sport giant admitted to feeling lost. That contrast between the historical version of Hamilton and that of Hungary 2025 is brutal. The man who once turned curves 4 and 11 of Hungaroring into a millimeter work of art, now could barely describe what he felt as a total disconnection. The scenario that gave him so much forced him to look in, and what he found there was doubt. Doubt of himself. Doubt of the purpose that led him to change from airs to dress the red of Maranello. What many media described as a simple sports disappointment was actually a cry for help. Not only because of the lack of performance, but for a quieter and more dangerous internal struggle, to feel replaceable. In a team where history weighs tons and the impatience for results is tradition, Hamilton was exposed to all as never before. And that, beyond the technical, marked the real weekend disaster. The SF-25, in theory, should be an evolution of the promising car of the previous season. Ferrari reached 2025 with the ambition to correct the design and strategy errors that had left them at the gates of the title in 2024. Aerodynamic efforts were redoubled, a new concept of suspension was introduced, and a greater adaptability was sought in high-load traces. But what seemed like a firm step towards the title, in practice it became an indomitable tool for Hamilton. A car that simply does not speak its language. During the practice sessions in Hungaroring, Hamilton described his experience as a constant struggle. Not against the rivals, but against the car itself. He mentioned that the behavior of the SF-25 was not limited to a classic subverming or an aggressive survival. It was more chaotic, more unpredictable. It's very inconsistent from curve to curve, he said. And that is the key phrase. Because in Formula One, consistency is everything. A car can be fast, even unstable, provided it is predictably. But the SF-25 does not have that virtue. What worked in a curve failed in the next. What seemed like grip at the entrance disappeared without notice at the exit. This pattern forced Hamilton to constantly modify his style, something almost suicidal in classification, where the slightest mental adjustment can cost you unrecoverable tenths. The root of the problem seems to be in the mechanical heart of the car. Ferrari opted for an aggressive reinterpretation of the suspension system. Push rod in front and pull rod behind. A concept that, in theory, allows a greater freight transfer in braking and improves the contact of the tire with the asphalt. But this design has a treacherous particularity, a very high geometric variation in dynamic compression situations. That is, when the car is going through rapid changes or rapid curve transitions, the way in which the suspension manages the weight varies too fast, destabilizing the general balance of the car. For Leclerc, which has grown within Maranello's technical ecosystem, this behavior is familiar. You can even take advantage of some sectors of the layout. But for Hamilton, accustomed to a completely different base in Mercedes' softer, progressive and centered on traction control, this architecture is an enigma. Every time he tries to print his classic style, the car responds with an unexpected reaction. And this is not about adaptation simply. It is a broken communication between pilot and machine. The problem goes beyond the technical. It is a philosophical issue. Hamilton has built its success on the basis of the sensory connection with its car. It is not only about telemetry, but about feeling the limit with surgical precision. That ability to know, before the electronics say it, when it is about to lose the rear or when you need to keep the load on the front train. And the SF-25, with its volatile character, denies that connection. In addition, this car does not have a wide operating window. In specific conditions with fresh tires and ideal temperatures, it can fly. It is demonstrated by Leclerc in classification. But the margin to reach that optimal point is so narrow that any deviation causes a sharp drop in performance. And that is unacceptable in a championship where the slightest track means losing 3 or 4 positions. Hamilton said it rawly, he is far from going on rails. In modern Formula One, winning cars are not the most extreme but the most manageable. Those that allow the pilot to operate in a wide area, without dancing at the edge of the abyss every lap. And the SF-25 today is quite the opposite. This technical disconnection is feeding a spiral of frustration in Hamilton that is not corrected with patches. It demands a conceptual redesign, because it is not a pilot out of form or a slow car. It is a machine that demands a language that Hamilton still does not dominate, or worse, that he is not willing to learn because it makes no sense to him. In the heart of the performance of a Formula One pilot, there is a component that does not usually steal headlines, but that defines the confidence return: the brakes. And in the case of Lewis Hamilton, the change of supplier when arriving in Ferrari represented a technical and psychological obstacle that has been as decisive as silent. After more than a decade with the carbon industry system in Mercedes, its transition to the Brembo Ferrari system has not been simply a matter of adjustment, but a complete redefinition of its braking reference. To understand the magnitude of this change, you have to understand how Hamilton works the input to curve. 4 years, he perfected a technique based on brake touch sensitivity, where every pressure millimeter could be adjusted almost intuitively. The carbon industry system offered a predictable modulation, even in extreme conditions, allowing it to stop late and with surgical control. It was an extension of his left foot. On the other hand, the Brembo system, although equally efficient in terms of gross braking power, offers a different response. More steep, with more sensitive operating temperature variations, and above all, with a much more volatile work window. Hamilton described it rarely: it's a lottery. You put a brake game and work. You put another and no. This phrase contains an awkward truth for Ferrari. It is not about the quality of the material, but its inconsistency. In training, a game can offer ideal bite and progression, but in classification or career, that feeling can disappear. And for a pilot who builds his trust on constant references, this type of uncertainty is devastating. The impact is amplified in a circuit such as Hungaroring. Here, the braking points are short and critical. Curve 1 requires a brutal deceleration from high speed while maintaining lateral control. Curve 5, in descent, requires perfect dosage to avoid the blocking of the left front tire. And the sequence between curves 8 and 11 is a dance and transfer dance that punishes any error in braking timing. In all these areas, Hamilton reported disconnected sensations, as if the car did not respond predictably to its inputs. For a pilot who stops late but trusts the stability that follows, this disconnection is deadly. In addition, there is a deeper component. The brakes are not only a control instrument, but also a balancing tool of the car. Hamilton usually uses the brake to load the front of the car, direct the turn, and generate traction at the exit. If you cannot anticipate the system reaction, you lose your ability to position the car in your style. This forces him to drive reactively, more defensive, more rigid. And that, in classification, is the end of any aspiration. The impossibility of generating a uniform sensation between turns has caused Hamilton to enter conservative mode in sections where it used to make differences. It does not attack the braking as before, the vertex is not thrown with the same confidence. And this, in a sport of microscopic margins, means that it loses tenths without even making visible mistakes. Ferrari, aware of the problem, has tried to adjust the initial pedal pressure, modify the distribution ratio, and change the cooling pipelines. But so far, no solution has been definitive. It's like trying to adjust a tuning that changes frequently in each curve. And for Hamilton, that is perhaps the biggest challenge of this stage with Ferrari, not being able to trust something as basic as the braking, the first step of each curve. The relationship between pilot and car is built on trust. And in this crucial aspect, the SF-25 has failed. Not due to lack of braking power, but for not offering the assurance that each pedal tread will bring the same answer. In a category where precision is everything, that doubt is an abyss. It wasn't just a bad classification. It was not only a day in which an elite pilot was out of Q3. What happened in Hungary was much deeper. It was the confirmation that, beyond the results, there is a structural conflict between a legendary pilot and a machinery that does not adapt to his art. It was the tangible sample of a technical relationship that has not been consolidated, and most worrying, of an emotional state that is starting to wear out. When a pilot runs out of clear references without technical consistency and the total responsibility for failure is self-imposed, the result is not only poor performance, it is a professional identity crisis. That is what happened in Hungary. Hamilton was not only eliminated in Q2. He left that weekend with more doubts than certainties about his project in Ferrari. And not for lack of effort, not for disinterest, but because he is facing a more complex, more resistant adaptation curve, and what is worse, emotionally more harmful than he ever anticipated. Ferrari, meanwhile, is in an awkward position. It has a car that, in the right hands, can fight for poles and podiums. Leclerc showed it. But at the same time, he has a star pilot who fails to take advantage of him. And in a team where the media and political pressure is constant, every 10th loss, each missing session, each poorly managed classification becomes an argument against